Tell me, yeah, what's going on? All right. Yeah. Bring it down a little bit, Eddie. Yeah. A little bit, right there. Here we go. Here we go. Hey, baby, what you know good? I'm getting back what you knew I would. Boys, hey, when will it end? When will people start getting together again? Things will never get better. News ain't worrying. What else is new, my friend? Besides what I read, can't find no work, can't find no job, my friend. Money is tighter than it's ever been. Woo! Hey man, I just don't understand what's going on across this land. What's happening, brother? Hey, what's happening? I want to know. Going things. Now walk up with the minute. Do you think they have a chance? And tell me, friend, how in the world have you been? Tell me what's out. I want to know what's in. What's the deal? What's the deal, man? What's happening? What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening, brother? I want to know what's happening. What's happening, my man? Been gone a long, long time. Now I'm back on the scene. What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening, brother? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening?
All right. Welcome to another edition of Conversations with Conrad. I'm your host, Reverend Conrad Tillard. And as always, if you're tuned in, if you're watching and listening, you are listening to Conversations with Conrad. We come to you not from the narrow and doctrinaire right, but nor do we come to you from the equally narrow, doctrinaire, and I might add, foolish left, excessive. And so we come to you straight down the middle, a common sense perspective rooted in the African American experience. We have a lot to talk with you about today, but I would like to get you to do me one favor as we begin. I want you to share. I want you to like, tell a relative, tell a friend about Conversations with Conrad, one of the few places that you will be able to get a different perspective. In fact, the only place that you will be able to get this unique perspective. You see, if you listen to the standard Black shows, you're going to get a left wing perspective. You're going to get a quote unquote progressive perspective. And, you know, when they say progressive today, it's not the same as Malcolm X progressive or Martin Luther King progressive. You see, those leaders fought for Black power. Amiri Baraka, progressive. They were for Black power, Black people advancing. Today's progressive means a whole coterie of things, and usually Black folks are at the end, especially Black men. And so when I come to you, I come from a perspective that's very unique. It's not left. You're not going to get the MSNBC perspective. You're not going to get the even the Urban View on satellite radio. You're certainly not going to get Roland and Mark Thompson. These are guys that come from the left. But you're also not going to get a right-wing perspective from me either. And you're going to get a unique, a very nuanced perspective. But the root of my views are found in the common folk wisdom of the African Americans that I have met along the way. Gil Scott-Heron has a wonderful song that he dedicated to Fannie Lou Hamer. It's called 95 South, All of the Places We've Been. And in that song, he talks about what his life has been like and what our progress has been like, moving from where we were to the mountain top that we have now been able to get to. And I can't, he says, now that I've gotten to the middle of the mountain, being mindful of those that forge the way, I can't stop now and give up on them. So we've pushed even further in the 40 years since that song. And now we are high on the mountain, but we can't forget. We can't stop and forget and give up on the ancestors that have brought us this far. So please share, please like when you listen to this podcast later on at your leisure. Please let folks know. Today we're going to cover one of the biggest topics that's been covered in the last 48 hours, 24 hours, and I'm sure it's been covered in a myriad of ways, but it hasn't been covered the way I'm going to cover it. See, there's something about being unique when you got a different perspective. I come from a third eye, as James M. Timley used to say. I come from a perspective that the common streets of Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant and all of the places I've been, talking to people in the neighborhood. And so, but I do want to set it up because we were all shocked when just yesterday, Joe Biden released this statement. I'll read some of it. Today, I've signed a pardon for my son, Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision making. I kept my word, even as I've watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted without aggravating factors like use in a crime or multiple purchases or buying a weapon as a straw purchaser. People are almost never brought to trial on felony charges solely for how they filled out a gun form. Those who were late paying their taxes because of serious addictions, but paid them back subsequently with interest and penalties, are typically given non criminal resolutions. It is clear that Hunter was treated differently. The charge in his case came about only after several of my political opponents in Congress instigated them to attack me and oppose my election. Then a carefully negotiated plea deal, agreed to by the Department of Justice, unraveled in the courtroom, with a number of my political opponents in Congress taking credit for bringing political pressure on the process. Had the plea deal held, it would have been a fair, reasonable resolution for Hunter. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out, not only because he is my son, and that is wrong. There has been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. In trying to break Hunter, they tried to break me. And there's no reason to believe that it will stop here. Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle. Just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here's the truth. I believe in the justice system, but I've wrestled with it. I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. That's the statement, official White House statement on yesterday from Joseph R. Biden, the president of the United States. As we begin to analyze this, let's listen to what has been said in the last 48 hours concerning this bombshell decision. And then I will come back and we'll analyze.
Congressman, first, your reaction to Biden's pardon of Hunter.
Well, look, the one thing I certainly agree with is that this was an improperly politicized prosecution. Those two charges, as I know from 10 years as a prosecutor in the Department of Justice, are almost never, if ever, charged against a defendant in a standalone indictment. And the reason why they were charged is because Republicans in Congress improperly tried to intervene in an ongoing prosecution to scuttle a plea agreement that Hunter Biden and David Weiss had entered into. The plea agreement was unusual because of Donald Trump's threats of retribution and Hunter Biden's understandable concern that if Donald Trump won, that his Department of Justice would come after Hunter for other crimes that he wasn't charged with but was investigated for. So the president is exactly right that if his name were Hunter Smith and not Hunter Biden, he would not be charged with this, and that is not a proper outcome here. That's not a proper use of our rule of law. I wish the president had not stated after the plea agreement fell through that he would not pardon Hunter Biden, because it is discouraging that he has now gone back on his word on that. But the merits of the pardon and the reasons for it are legitimate, especially as you look at who Donald Trump is nominating, people like Matt Gaetz, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, all of whom have threatened retribution against Hunter Biden and others.
Okay, you went out on a limb backing up Biden when he said that there would not be a pardon. In July of 2023, just after that plea deal fell through, this is what you said. I want to watch.
Do you think a pardon for his son would be a mistake?
Yes, and I don't think there's any chance that President Biden is going to do that, unlike his predecessor, who pardoned all of his friends and anyone who had any access to him. And I think you see that in this case, where he kept on, and Merrick Garland kept on, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney to investigate the president's son. If there is not an indication of the independence of the Department of Justice beyond that, I don't know what we could look for.
What does that feel like, watching yourself back then, reassuring people that Biden was not going to issue a pardon for his son?
Yeah, and I think that if that plea agreement and that plea deal had gone through, pardon, that was a satisfactory outcome.
It had already fallen
that
through.
Only was. Sorry?
Well, when he acted, this was when the deal had fallen through. And I hear what you're saying about. You know,
let's stop. Let's stop there.
So what does that
let's
like,
pause there for a minute, because let's pause there for a minute. That's Congressman Dan Golden from New York City, and it's really interesting. Clearly, Joe Biden said that he would not pardon Hunter Biden. He said that 10 times. He said that he believed in the jury verdict. He believed in the rule of law. And there you saw Dan Goldman very confidently saying that Joe Biden would not pardon Hunter when he was confronted on it. He tried to justify it by saying Biden only did it because the plea deal fell apart. And the CNN reporter pointed out to him, the statement you made saying that Joe Biden would never pardon Hunter was after the plea deal had already fallen apart. And so obviously he had egg on his face. He could not hide behind the mere fact, as Joe Biden did in his statement, that the plea deal fell apart. Therefore, he changed course. He told the American people when he was running and when he became president, when he expected to run again, that he would not interfere. But now I guess, well, I'm going to save my analysis for a few moments. I want to check out a few more of these folks. Let's go back.
Weeks before Hunter Biden was set to receive his punishment after a guilty plea on tax charges. And this also comes less than 2 months before President-elect Trump is set to return to the White House. All of this caps a long-running legal saga for Hunter Biden, who publicly disclosed he was under federal investigation in December of 2020, a month after his father's victory. And it also casts perhaps a pall over President Biden's legacy. Now, in a statement released Sunday evening, or just part of that with you right here. This is what President Biden shared, quote, "No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is done. That is wrong." He goes on to say, quote, "In trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle: just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded. Here is the truth. I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision." Now, the actual pardon is a full and unconditional pardon, and it states, quote, "For those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted." And it goes on to say that he has sworn this on record. To talk more about this, I do want to bring in David Washington, CEO of Jane Washington Political Firm. David, thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's my pleasure and good to see you again.
So I just read part of this presidential pardon, specifically the last part. It is a full and unconditional pardon. I mean, it's sweeping in nature. What do you make of this?
Well, personally, if I was in the president's shoes, I would do the same. I would do the same for my sons. And I understand the political landscape that we will see after January 20th, 2025, that President Biden is making a decision or has made a decision to protect his son and his family from any further political scrutiny in regards to perhaps retaliation or investigation into his son any further, thus damaging anything to the Biden legacy.
Yeah, and let's talk about the Biden legacy. President Biden repeatedly saying that he would not pardon or commute Hunter Biden's sentence, repeatedly saying that on all sorts of public forums now, saying that he's wrestled with that decision, coming to the one conclusion that he would, in fact, pardon him. Does that surprise you?
It does not. And again, this is politics. It does surprise me that it came at this time. I thought that if there was going to be a pardon, it would come in the waning hours of the Biden presidency. However, I'm not surprised. Like other Americans, I am disappointed that he did not follow through on his promise. And he did promise to
that President Biden pardoned his son.
Does the president justice system has been weaponized for political purposes and that it needs root and branch reform?
No, read the president's statement. Seriously, read the president's statement. He said he believes in the Department of Justice. He does. He also believes politics infected the process and it led to a miscarriage of justice. He believes his son was unfairly targeted. He said that what his political opponents have done to my son, that's his words, is cruel and enough is enough.
Really does she lies. She just makes stuff up. Yes, you're saying that
Okay.
politics have gotten involved in the justice system, which they
All
lauded
right.
as
Okay.
believing in the justice system. You can't believe in the justice system and say politics
unpack
got
some of
involved in the
this.
justice system.
I gave you a couple of different looks. I gave you a couple of different reports on Biden. Well, let me play one more, and then I'll get into this analysis. All right, let me give you one more perspective. This is sort of broad approach and broad reach.
Charlamagne the God made news.
All right, let's do
maybe,
one more.
for the first time outside his very successful show. I thought when he was interviewing Joe Biden, and he said, you know, if you don't, but he asked him a tough question. Biden didn't like it. He said, well, you know what? If you don't vote for me, you ain't black. He's like, and you saw him take a double. Excuse me?
When he was vice president. So since that time, he made it clear, too, that he wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden this time. And then Kamala Harris, who they've been friends with when she was a DA or Attorney General out in Florida, California. When she went in, he went all in. No doubt about it. He also expressed chagrin when he saw Joe Biden, who he knows called Donald Trump Hitler and a fascist that would ruin the country and end all elections, shaking hands and explaining pleasantries in the White House. And now his surprise continues to grow. He's wondering, how sincere were you when you said that? And now he's wondering, too, after the pardon, do I have to rethink entirely the entire party?
Right, because Joe Biden was emphatic. He was not going to pardon Hunter Biden, his son. We all knew he was going to. Charlamagne knew he would, but nonetheless, he had a great soundbite yesterday, Charlamagne did, and we're going to play it for you, about how essentially Joe Biden has blown up his own party. Democrats can't say you're the ethical party anymore after what Joe did to all of us. Watch.
Hunter was singled out because he broke the law. He was singled out because he had an illegal gun and tax evasion charges, not because he was the president's son. And I just want Democrats to stop acting like they are on this moral high ground politically when they have shown us they're not, whether it's skipping the primary process when Biden stepped down to things like Biden pardoning his son. Stop acting like y'all the pure party and Republicans aren't. And it also shows me elected officials can do whatever they want as long as they have the political will and courage to do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. That's Charlamagne the God. So we've had an opportunity to look at a number of people who've reflected upon President Biden's pardoning his son, Hunter. And, Dan Goldman, of course, is a Democratic hack and shill. He's going to defend the Democrats no matter what. Corinne Jean-Pierre, a sister from Brooklyn, is the White House press secretary, White House spokesperson rather. So she, of course, is in the unenviable position of having consistently said that Biden would not pardon Hunter. And then, of course, as the president's spokesperson, she's got to justify it. She's got to come up with a reason. And I think probably the only person out of that montage that was honest and expresses the true sentiment, not the full extent that I'm about to analyze, but Charlamagne the God, of course, is not a professional political operative, but like most of the American people, he has been deeply concerned about the country. He's observed the last several years, was greatly vested in this election, and now seeing the hypocrisy of Biden, who said he wouldn't pardon his son, who now is saying he only pardoned his son because he feels basically he's saying exactly what Trump has been saying for the last 4 years, 3.5 years, being prosecuted here in the state of New York by the Attorney General, Letitia James, being prosecuted in Georgia by Fani Willis, the Fulton County prosecutor, and being prosecuted in Manhattan by Alvin Bragg. Basically, Biden is saying the same thing that Trump has been saying, that the criminal justice system has been weaponized against me. Trump uses the term lawfare to say that were I not running for president, if I were not Donald Trump, none of these charges would have been brought against me. Okay, a rape, alleged sexual assault from 40 years ago, paying off a porn star, having her sign a non-disclosure agreement, and other charges, challenging an election, having a conversation that he describes as perfect with the Secretary of State, saying that I believe that they stole the election. All I need is 11,000 votes. And I'll leave you to make what you will of each of those conversations. But I want to just start by saying, Biden did consistently say that he would not pardon his son. And you and I and everyone involved sort of realized that that was highly unlikely. That was political posture. He said that when he was running, when he had recently been elected, and he said it as long as he thought he had to run for re-election again. When the Democrats sort of summarily executed him, politically speaking, after a disastrous debate performance, and he would not win again, and the Democrats lost, his political career is over. I mean, gosh, it's extended since 1972. It should have been over a long time ago. He certainly is not running for anything anymore. And he did what most people thought he was going to do anyway. He pardoned his son. That being said, I am not particularly surprised, and I don't blame a man for pardoning his son. I do blame him because he represented himself, and the Democrats have represented him as a paragon of virtue, contrasting him to Donald Trump, when in fact he proved to be no different than Donald Trump. If he feels that the criminal justice system was unfair to his son, or if he realizes it was fair, but he wants to look out for his own interest, he will do what's in his son and his interest. And he's done that. He's pardoned his son. Now, keep in mind, it's not a simple matter of Hunter Biden was unfairly targeted. For those of you who followed the Hunter Biden laptop story, for those of you who followed what the Hunter Biden story was really about, it was not about the porn on his computer, though there were some reports that there was inappropriate pornography, maybe illegal nature involving minors. There were reports to that effect. But the Hunter Biden story was not about the fact that Hunter Biden was a drug addict. It was not about the fact that Hunter Biden had a lot of pornography on his computer, allegedly. It was not about the fact that Hunter Biden had a gun or filled out an application for a gun. For those who watched that story, they realized that the Justice Department charged him with those crimes, and those were the lesser crimes that he could have been open to. In other words, the Justice Department that the Biden presidency sort of oversees, okay? And if you don't believe that the Justice Department is impacted by who is in the White House, then all you have to do is remember that John Kennedy appointed his brother, his little brother, his kid brother, Bobby Kennedy, as the Attorney General. The fact of the matter is, and this is where I am very distrustful of the media is terrible in the sense that they are hypocrites. They long since abandoned investigative journalism because all during the election of 2020, there was this report of Hunter Biden having this laptop. There were reports of these emails to the family where he was saying he was tired of carrying the family and paying the big guy. There were reports of what the right was calling all along Biden Inc. Now, the fact of the matter is, we don't really know what to make of that story. The story sort of alleged that Hunter Biden was doing business with China, doing business with the Ukraine, getting huge $1 million payouts to do consultant work in sectors, energy, and foreign affairs that he wasn't an expert in. The allegation was that he was a mere bag man for the Biden clan, he and President Biden's brother, and that they were essentially trading on President Biden's position as vice president. They were trading on access to that Hunter had to his father as a way of influencing or selling his influence improperly. Now, keep in mind, you don't know a lot about that story because when the story broke during the election of 2020, the media wouldn't report on it. High tech wouldn't report on it. In fact, they said it was Russian interference. They wouldn't even allow stories published in newspapers to be posted on the internet because at that time, they didn't want you to know about that. They wanted Trump out. There was a grand conspiracy of all of these media outlets and the Democrats and big tech to say, we got to get Trump out. So anything unseemly about Joe Biden, we're not going to let the voters even hear about it. Now, whatever you thought about it, wherever you would have voted anyway, do you really want the press to come together in a conspiracy with any particular Democratic Party? Do you want them to abandon their mission as the fourth estate, where they're supposed to keep political figures held accountable? They did not do that. They did not tell you the truth. This story was never Russian interference. It was never propaganda. Never should have been flagged on the internet. The American people should have had this factor to be able to process during the election in case they wanted to say, this allegation of corruption is a bridge too far for me. I think that Biden, his character, his integrity is under question. They wouldn't allow that to happen. They didn't even cover the story. And so after Biden was safely elected, which was the objective of the media and the Democrats and big tech, all right, they were all involved in conspiracy together. They then said, okay, now we can let the story come out. But a prosecutor, a federal prosecutor out of Delaware, charged Hunter with filling out an application for a gun incorrectly, which is a felony, and a little tax issue. And they killed the investigation there. They never looked at the connection to the Ukraine. They never looked at payments that allegedly were made by China to the Biden family through Hunter. Again, I hate to put it this way, a dope fiend with no particular expertise in foreign affairs or in the energy sector. So what I want you to understand is that you were duped. You were bamboozled. Maybe you were an unindicted co-conspirator in the conspiracy because you knew it, but you also wanted to get rid of Trump, so you just turned a blind eye. That's up to each individual voter. If you want to be lied to, if you don't want the truth to come out, that's fine. I mean, you could have made your decision to vote for Biden anyway. Press had no business basically conspiring with the Democrats to keep the American people from even knowing the facts. And so when the president says that his son was singled out for prosecution, what he really should be saying is that he and his son and his brother, according to many allegations that are made, and the money trail and the emails that were discovered, they dodged a bullet, because this investigation should have gone further. And had the press been honest, had the press done its job, they would have asked the question, why was Hunter Biden entitled to make $4 million, $6 million, or any millions of dollars based upon his condition, based upon his expertise? That was held from the American people, and that was wrong by the press. And so when Biden says his son was mistreated and that's why he pardoned him, don't you believe it? Now, maybe he did expect that when the Trump Justice Department came in, they would pick up that investigation again, and they would further look into these allegations against President Biden, Jim Biden, his brother, and Hunter Biden, and what the Republicans call Biden Inc. And therefore, President Biden gave a blanket pardon covering any and all crimes that my son committed between 2014 and 2024. My Lord. I mean, that's a 10-year period in which he said, hey, no matter what he did, if he robbed a bank, if he murdered somebody, no matter what he did, if he raped somebody, he has a full and complete pardon. And if that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does. Now, okay, he pardoned his son. We all expected that. We're not stupid, okay? I would have pardoned my son. I wouldn't have lied about it. He didn't have to lie about it. He could have easily said to the American people before the 10 times he said unequivocally he wouldn't, I'm considering it. I'm weighing it. I want to see what happens. He could have done that. He didn't. Now, that being said, you pardon your boy. What about Reverend Jesse Jackson's boy? Nobody has done more to help America fulfill its promise of being a nation in which all citizens are able to enjoy the rights, privileges, and fruits that the Constitution promises its citizenry. No one has done more than Reverend Jesse Jackson, picking up from the work of his mentor, Dr. Martin Luther King. Will you pardon Jesse Jackson Jr., who's paid his debt to society, who's done a great job in rehabilitating himself and continuing to serve as he has his whole life? The Black community. Come on, Black women. You saved democracy. You're talking about the number of the percentage of votes that you gave to Biden. You should demand that Jesse Jackson and Sandy Jackson are pardoned as Hunter was. Marylin Mosby. Come on, Black sisters. This is where you use your leverage. You fought for Biden. You voted 96% for Biden. This is where you should demand that a Black woman from Baltimore, Maryland, a prosecutor, a progressive prosecutor that was prosecuted and many believe unfairly convicted simply because she withdrew money that was her money. She didn't steal. There was no public corruption. Now, she wasn't really contrite. She believed she'd done nothing wrong. So she stood up and said, I didn't do anything wrong. And maybe that's why she was convicted. I don't know. But the fact remains, she has been convicted. She has lost property. She may lose her law license. Black women, come on now. You should join Angela Rye. That's one thing I agree with Angela Rye about. You should demand that Marylin Mosby be pardoned and that her record be clean so that she can go back to making a living and go back to practicing law. And if she wants to go back into public service, she can do that. If Biden pardoned his son, then those of you, come on, Clyburn, those of you that have fought and rabidly defended him, and I'm talking about Sonny Holston, I'm talking about Roland Martin, where are your demands now on the man that you fought for, that you foamed at the mouth for? Where are your demands now? Because President Joe Biden should commute the sentences and pardon thousands of Black people as he leaves office. His political career is over. Black people put him in the White House, even after he put hundreds of thousands of Black men in prison. Go back to '94 and listen to his speech. Listen to, I won't play it today, but because I don't have time, but I'll play it when he played to the segregationists, when he joined with the most reactionary, as you call them, reactionary right wing. He joined with them and put young people from inner cities in prison for small amounts of crack cocaine, 18, 19 years old, and some getting 20, 30, 40, 50-year sentences. Okay, so that's right. Muskegon Tribune, the Congressional Black Caucus should be demanding that Biden has wholesale pardons of people in the African American community that were either unjustly convicted or have served their time, paid their debt to society. That should be the very least that Black people demand for this about face, this self-serving gesture on the part of Joe Biden. But don't you cry crocodile tears for Joe Biden, and don't you buy into that deceptive statement. Joe Biden and his family have been in office since '72. They have become rich off the public dole, and there was a lot more to that Biden Inc. story, and now we'll never know. We'll never know. But I hope that Jesse Jackson Jr. and of course Marylin Mosby will get pardons as a result of this. You know, but it really upset me yesterday because I was hearing people like Whoopi Goldberg and all of these Democrats and liberals and people trying to justify this mess. And, you know, not acknowledging that this was a lie, not acknowledging that this was to curb a greater investigation. Hunter was charged with the very least of the potential crimes that were committed. That's why that deal fell apart, because it was a sweetheart deal where basically he would have had no accountability. It was sweeping in terms of what he would have gotten away with. And when the press finally did their job, which they didn't do until after the election, the public pressure, that's all it was. It wasn't any political pressure. The Republicans did not control the Justice Department. The Republicans had no ability to pressure this prosecutor except for the light of public scrutiny and the sweetheart deal that they had concretized being exposed. That's the only leverage that was brought to bear on the deal. And so, but it upset me because, you know, it just reminds me of how And sisters, I have to say this. Sometimes you have this tendency where you will go to war for these white males. And it's the most schizophrenic thing I ever have heard in life, because all you hear now out of the DEI movement is white males don't need to be hired. White males shouldn't take all the jobs. White males, old white men. And yet, every time one of these old white men get in trouble, you're the first one on the line to defend them. One of the reasons why I looked askance at the Me Too movement, this movement that has, and believe me, it's important to have a movement that highlights the abuse of women. I have a mother, I have a daughter, and I support that. But what I don't like is how selective the outrage is depending on who commits the crime. In other words, you don't want R. Kelly's music even played. You not only want the man to serve time, and he is serving 30 years, but you don't even want his music played. But you see, I remember when Bill Clinton was having sex, not with an underage girl, because Monica Lewinsky was a very young woman. But you see, I grew up in DC, and there's a long history of those Capitol pages and those interns being used and abused by those congressional leaders. I remember in the early 80s, Barney Frank, a congressman out of Massachusetts, he had almost a house of prostitution going on with young boys, young Capitol pages. He never paid a price for that. Democrats covered that up, and Barney Frank never paid a price for what he was doing to those pages, those Capitol pages. And the same thing happened with Bill Clinton. The Republicans held his feet to the fire, but it was Donna Brazile and a lot of these Black women that were the number one people defending him, saying, it's only sex. I mean, what are we talking about? James Carville and all of these people. You expect he and George to defend him. But why would the sisters so adamant in defending this man when you don't defend Black men like that, when they're accused of wrongdoing, not like you used to? Today you don't, and that troubles me. And so you're going to defend Biden no matter what he's done. Cuomo, I hear sisters all over the country. Oh, I like Cuomo. He's good looking. But you don't know anything about Cuomo. You don't know about the difficulty Black people had with Mario Cuomo when he was governor. You don't know about how Andrew Cuomo was a bully. Why would you defend him? I even hear women in New York talking about they would support Cuomo for mayor over Eric Adams when Cuomo just left the governor's mansion for alleged sexual abuse. He resigned in disgrace. But my point is, what's wrong with us? Why do we always defend people, but we are very, very harsh when it comes to African American men? We've got to have some serious conversations in the Black community about that. And so don't defend Biden. Don't defend Clinton. Don't defend Cuomo, Chris Cuomo, who had journalistic ethical violations. Don't defend these people. Hold their feet to the fire and show that you are fair, that you are just. Because you see, when you show that you really defend the honor of women, that you defend women from being abused, no matter who does it, then it has more credibility. But if you are subjective, and if it's a Democrat that molests children or has an inappropriate, it's almost statutory rape, almost. I don't know legally if it is or not, but it's almost statutory rape when a president of the United States is having sex with an intern that works in his office that's barely of legal age. The power dynamic is so great that it's almost like she really couldn't really consent. The power dynamics were so great. You should be making those arguments because those are arguments that you love to make instead of defending these unethical politicians. And so that upsets me. When just say it, just be honest. The dude is slick. Biden is slick as greased lightning. He charmed you. He ran with white segregationists in the 70s and throughout. And then, of course, he joined Newt Gingrich and others and Bill Clinton in the 90s and played tough and put a whole bunch of black folks in jail. And then because you hated Trump so much, you were willing to forgive all of that. Just like with Liz Cheney. Her father is a war criminal. The neocons are vicious. These are racists that came out of the 1960s and 70s. They were liberals and they became the most vicious racists that challenged things like affirmative action, challenged things like blacks getting opportunities when we have been historically denied. And they're the creators of the New World Order. And yet Kamala Harris ran around with Liz Cheney, of all people. There are millions of people who died because of her father's warmongering, lying to the American people, and profit making off of the misery, death, and destruction of a whole lot of people. And yet we defended Liz Cheney. And not only that, but when Trump raised a good point and said, all of these people, all of these warmongers that love to commit American troops around the world, commit young people to go fight, die, and kill other people, and to come back maimed and scarred and emotionally destroyed in wars for profit. And you are going to lift up this woman and you want to win that bad? It means that much to you that you will literally march this woman around as some symbol of goodness? You should have been ashamed to even go in the same room with Elizabeth Cheney. And that's why the Republicans voted her out. And they don't want anything to do with her. But we had such hatred for Donald Trump that it was even irrational that we would accept. I'll take Trump any day over Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney. You count the number of people that Trump is responsible for the murder of, and you compare it to the Cheneys. And if murder, killing innocent women, children, men, and babies matters to you, then there is absolutely no comparison between the two. Now, let me just transition because I don't have the full 2 hours today, and I'm not going to be much longer. But one of the things I wanted to say today, it's very important because it speaks to this whole issue of the Trump cabinet. You know, the cabinet is being formed now. And as you know, there are a lot of very controversial picks. And, you know, I don't know who these folks really are. And I'm not making the argument that they are good people. But I am going to make the argument that we need to demystify this whole notion of qualifications. You see, Black people, we sell ourselves short. We sell ourselves cheap. Jesse Jackson, I reasoned in 1984, who had been a civil rights worker, worked with Dr. King, had been a student activist and a preacher, and the leader of a nonprofit, Operation Push, which had a great impact upon my life and young people as we grew up in the 1970s and 80s. And just about every time we heard Jesse, he was shouting, "I am somebody. I am somebody." And that sure helped us to remember that we were somebody. And in 1983, November, the Washington Convention Center, when Reverend Jackson stood with everybody in Black America that day. I mean, Marion Barry, Percy Sutton, Shirley Chisholm, you name it. If they, Mervyn Dimley, a congressman from California, if they were somebody, Walter Fauntroy, they were there that day. And the chant went up over and over again, "Run, Jesse, run. Run, Jesse, run." And as a student, I knew that Jesse Jackson was qualified. He had never been a congressman. He'd never been elected. He never held public office. But his experience, his life experience, his intellect more than qualified him. I mean, do you think he could have gone to Syria and negotiated the release of Lieutenant Robert Goodman if he were not qualified? Or gone to Havana and negotiated the release of American hostages? Or gone to the Rose Garden as he did when he brought Goodman home and literally, with Reagan and Bush standing right there, he dominated the press conference and the media availability, showing on every stage, with every speech, in every debate, that the field of also-rans, mediocrity personified, that made up that 84 field, Fritz Hollins, Fritz Mondale, Gary Hart, Playboy Gary Hart, old wrestling manager. And we had a Gary Hart that ended up being a Playboy, but Jesse Jackson was qualified. Black people were talking about, he's not qualified. He rhymes too much. See, you sell yourself short, okay? Donald Trump had never been elected dog catcher. He had never been on a school board. His first elected office was the highest office in the land. And yes, he's qualified. If you run businesses, if you have done business broadly, if you've engaged the political process, then you're qualified. Barack Obama had only been a state senator in Springfield, Illinois. You ever been to Springfield, Illinois? I don't mean to put Springfield down, but it's certainly nothing to write home about. To be the master of Springfield is a whole lot of nothing, okay? But he did become a state senator for a brief period of time. He served one term in the U.S. Senate, and he became president. Jack Kennedy was only in the Senate 7 years. So we got to demystify this whole concept of qualifications. Obama had never been president, and when he got in that office, he did an excellent job, okay? He did a great job. I mean, you can always debate whether you agree with this policy or disagree with that policy. The point I'm making is both Trump, Obama, all of these folks, they ran, they drove the car didn't crash, okay? And so this whole concept, this mystification of qualifications. You know, Trump has picked a lot of people who are outliers, people who would not be the traditional folks. And, you know, Black folks following the liberal media is focused on this issue of qualifications. And it doesn't matter whether, you know, these people have been to Princeton or Harvard. And it doesn't really matter because the liberal media is telling you they're not qualified. So you're going to run with whatever they say. Okay. Now, I don't just say they're qualified because they have the education or they've had professional careers, because I will go even further to say that even if you haven't had those things, you can be qualified if you have a general intellect, an agile intellect, and you know something of you have anecdotal experience. For example, Benjamin Carson is one of the most brilliant surgeons that we've ever produced in America. What was his qualification to be the head of housing, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development? He had no experience managing properties. He had no experience in public housing except the experience he had living in public housing. But he's an intelligent man. He understands the issues facing people in public housing. Therefore, he was more than qualified to be the secretary of that bureaucracy. Many of you are qualified. I know I'm qualified. I could be the HUD secretary. I'm qualified. I know enough about foreign affairs, foreign policy, that I could be an ambassador to any country, okay? I know enough about U.S. interests, U.S. foreign policy, that I could be at the State Department. I could be the Secretary of State. Stop letting other people, letting other people intimidate you to make you feel like they are so much greater than you, that they've got some special sauce or they've got some special insight. These people are no more intelligent than you. They are no more skilled than you. The difference is, as Reverend Jesse Jackson used to say, for the most part, we are giants with grasshopper complexes. And we look at the government as big white folks stuff, big white folks business. And we don't have any business in that. They used to say that Reverend Jesse Jackson was not qualified because he didn't have any foreign policy experience. And Reverend Jesse Jackson, with a brilliant quip, would say, he said, we came here on a foreign policy. He said, I know foreign policy. He said, when they gave my father a gun to shoot in the war, he knew which way to shoot. We know foreign policy. And what I'm saying to you is, if you're Black and you've lived in this country and you've done business, you've gone to school, you're qualified. We're qualified. And so Trump is bringing a lot of people in from outside of the government. They're close to him, which of course this time he's going to pick people close to him because he asserts that in his first administration, there were many deep staters, sort of permanent unelected bureaucrats in the government that undermined his term. I mean, only the president or the mayor or the governor is elected. Everybody else serves at the pleasure of the person that went before the electorate and was voted in. And so someone like John Bolton, who is a career diplomat, a neocon, he has no appeal, no broad appeal to the American public. He couldn't get elected. And so when Trump was elected, he's not going to let someone like John Bolton, who wants to go to war with everybody and kill everybody, determine the foreign policy. And that's why Black people shouldn't be running around here talking about Trump didn't listen to the experts. You sound foolish. There are no experts. There are no more experts than you. There are no more experts than people like Reverend Jackson and others who have studied these things. In fact, the government should send Black leaders to the Middle East, send Black leaders to Africa, to these troubled spots. When Reverend Jackson went to Syria to get Lieutenant Goodman, he took Minister Louis Farrakhan. He took Wyatt T. Walker and Bill Howard, Black ministers, to help negotiate on behalf of the United States in that troubled area. And so it's the president's pleasure to pick the staff and the secretaries that he believes are most qualified. And so stop getting upset. Stop, losing your mind, Black people. Get off of MSNBC. Get off of these programs. I've talked to so many women and men in the aftermath of the election, and they're clinically depressed. You're depressed because you let these people continuously tell you that if Trump got elected, the world was coming to an end. And guess what they're doing? he got elected. The world is still going on. And they knew it was a subterfuge. They knew it was a ruse, but you took it literally. We've got to stop looking at these politicians like Biden as religious figures. No politician is to be believed in. Some of them are good. Some of them have a basic goodness and integrity. But you cannot successfully get elected and rule and govern in this society without having an amoral quality. Not immoral, but sometimes as a politician, you have to be indifferent to morality. You have to be amoral. You have to be entirely transactional. And so, Black people, I'm trying to wake you up. Politics is okay if you look at it for what it is. If you are shocked by Biden changing on his word and issuing a pardon to his son, then you're looking at political figures as moral figures, and you're disappointed because he lied to you. Well, politicians lie all the time. They say one thing to one group, then they go right across town and say something completely different to another group. And even though this is a day of cell phones and the media often won't do their job on someone they like. But there used to be a concept in politics called whistle stop politics, where they'd ride the train across the country and tell every audience what they wanted to hear. And the next audience heard nothing of what they were saying. And that's how they got away with just promising people whatever they thought they wanted to hear. And so, my friends, stop looking at, let's start educating people to look at politics as a transactional evil. It's necessary, but it's transactional. Belief, passion, all that, let's save that for our religion, okay? And not for politics. But that being said, the country is up in an uproar right now about the person that Trump has nominated to be the new FBI director. And for the life of me, I can't understand. Now, I don't know Kash Patel. I don't know him personally. I don't know a lot about his background, except that he's had a number of positions in the government, in the intelligence sector. And, let's get over this concept of people aren't qualified. See, I want you all to get a book. The book was written in the 1950s by a great historian by the name of David Halberstam. And David Halberstam wrote a book called The Best and the Brightest. Actually, he wrote the book in the 60s. And the book was about the Kennedy administration, this whole sort of Camelot era of the Kennedys, this highly choreographed sort of image that was created around Kennedy, that he was young and handsome, rich, elite, and that he was a new generation president. The torch had been passed from Dwight Eisenhower. Kennedy was a war hero in that day when you never could have become president unless you were a war hero. That was before Bill Clinton and George Bush got out of service. And of course, Barack Obama never saw the inside of a military drill in his life. And Trump did go to military school. I don't know that qualifies you, with any real military training, but at least he did graduate from New York Military Academy. But in the old days, you had to be a military hero in order to become president. And but the thing that Kennedy did, and this is what Halberstam writes about, is that he emptied the boardrooms of big business and academia. And he brought people in from Harvard, from General Motors, from all of these really, the State Department. I mean, he just brought this brain trust of Ivy Leaguers and people that were supposed to be really smart into his cabinet. They brought us Vietnam. They brought us his ultimate assassination. They brought us a sort of ignoring of the civil rights movement in the early days. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I have never believed that Jack Kennedy or Dr. Martin Luther King. I mean, think about this. If you really want to know why I'm so skeptical of government, and when a guy like Kash Patel says that he wants to get rid of the deep state, he wants to close the FBI building, which is right there in downtown DC, on Constitution Avenue, I think it is. It's right there, named after J. Edgar Hoover, the ultimate insult to Black people. He says he wants to close the FBI building down on day one and make it a museum to the deep state. You see, the deep state is J. Edgar Hoover and Clyde Tolson and all of those FBI agents that were involved in the counterintelligence program that plotted against Dr. Martin Luther King, that recorded intimacies that he had with women other than his wife and sent them to Coretta Scott King and sent him a note saying if he didn't kill himself, they were going to expose him. That's the deep state. That's the corruption. That's what Trump is talking about. When he says, like Biden has said about his own son, that the intelligence community was weaponized against him from the very beginning, when they said they had pictures of him in the bed with prostitutes in Russia, with them urinating on him. When Comey brought him in and tried to threaten him by saying, we got this on you. If you don't conform, we'll let it go. That's what they did to Dr. King. Kill yourself, Hoover said. You're a moral reprobate. Look at all these tapes we have on you in these different cities. He was a man. He fell short of the glory of God, but his wife forgave him and loved him and stood beside him and was a hero for all that she did. But they wanted him to commit suicide. That's the FBI that you hear Negroes talking about. Why Trump insulted our FBI? You sound like a fool. Maybe we do need someone that understands beyond the patriotic gibberish about these intelligence agencies. You really believe that in both the Kennedy assassination and the King assassination, in both scenarios, some loser white boy from the dregs of society were able to track these very powerful men. In the case of James Earl Ray, he tracked Martin Luther King from LA to Atlanta to Memphis. He was an escaped convict at the time. Where was the money coming from? Who was financing him? James Earl Ray was ultimately able to buy a rifle and take up a position and kill Dr. King. And 5 years earlier, Lee Harvey Oswald had been to Russia. He had left the country, renounced his citizenship, married a Russian woman in the middle of the Cold War, living in Russia. And somehow he got back in the United States and found himself in the Texas School Depository Building when the most powerful man in the world came down the street with a $22 rifle. Both of these ne'er-do-wells killed two of the most powerful men in the world in the 1960s. And in both cases, no conspiracy, no one helped them, just two lone gunmen. You believe that? So when someone says that there's corruption and the deep state, Black people should err on the side of caution and say, that's right, I am deeply concerned about the FBI. I'm deeply concerned how this agency turned Black Panthers against us members, which resulted in a shooting in 1969 at UCLA with two Panthers, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, were killed. No, it goes on and on and on. I mean, there are too many things. Malcolm X and the Nation and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, where we've seen the memos where they were purposely divided from each other by our FBI. And so I think that if Trump can bring outside folks in, they're intelligent people. Stop listening to the media, the corporate media that's in the tank against him. Now, he's got to prove all the things he says he's going to do. But to me, some of these things seem like Black people would celebrate and welcome a man saying, I see how the intelligence community and the criminal justice system can be weaponized against people. We should welcome that kind of scrutiny and analysis, because if there's nothing else, these agencies, these institutions have been used to hurt our leaders, our organizations, our individuals. And if we can have a total reformation of the FBI, I think that would be one of the greatest things that could ever happen to the United States, because never has an institution been so unconstitutional in its misuse of its authority than that FBI. And so I don't know this Kash Patel, but I do know this. He wants to clean up the FBI. And with if he is confirmed, and again, our checks and balances, they work. You all got upset, and you start fretting and thinking that the world was coming to an end. They promised you that if Trump won, democracy was over. This sort of vacuous battle cry. We've got to save our democracy. Well, we're about 3 weeks from the election and democracy is still intact. It's going to be all right. Our institutions are strong. The checks and balances are strong. And if the press will do its job, not just against Republicans, but also against Democrats, then that fourth estate is a powerful bulwark against corruption of any administration. But press, you have lost credibility. All you talking heads, you've lost credibility, because your preference in the last two elections has been palpable. And the American people cannot trust media elites that think they know better. That was the lesson of Halberstam's book, The Best and the Brightest. How Kennedy emptied the shelf of all of these elite institutions and brought in all of these so-called smart folks. And they led us to the first war in which America was ever defeated. And that was the Vietnam War. And so what I would say to you Black folks is, you're a lot more qualified. You are qualified. And other folks are qualified. And so don't ever just repeat the lies. Don't ever repeat the propaganda. He's not qualified. She's not qualified. First, check out their credentials. And then what you should be saying is, yeah, they are qualified. And guess what? I'm qualified too. And advocate for yourself, because there are many of folk today that are in presidential palaces, Senate offices, people that grew up with threadbare breeches. I'm not just talking about blacks. I'm talking about many of these white congressmen and senators, many of these blue-collar folks. Don't let people intimidate you. You're not the only one that splits verbs. Many of these folk made it to these city council seats from these white ethnic neighborhoods and state senate, state representatives, and made it all the way to the Congress. Blue-collar guys. Guys like Jim Trafficant from Ohio, who was a real character. He wasn't of the manor born any more than someone like Danny Davis or Bobby Rush. Bobby Rush was qualified. He had been a Black Panther, the Minister of Defense, along with Fred Hampton. He was qualified. He was an American that was engaged in the civil rights struggle. Stop looking down on yourself. Stop taking your lead from the progressive movement. Stand up again. Think critically, as Black folks used to do. And when we're able to do that, we can think for ourselves, we can articulate for ourselves, we can reason for ourselves, as you've heard me do tonight, and as I do every show. That's why you got to spread this show. You're not going to get this perspective anywhere else. You know that. You know that you're not going to get this perspective anywhere else in Black America. So I thank you for tuning in this evening. And I'll be back in the next couple of days. Help me spread the word. And let's all join in the call for a pardon for Jesse Jackson Jr., for Sister Marylin Mosby. Let's not forget these two. And let's advocate for everyone that we know in Black America that was either falsely accused or has sufficiently paid their debt to society. Biden owes that to Black people. Were it not for you in South Carolina and James Clyburn, he would never have been elected. And yes, my sisters, you wonderful queens, you wonderful opinionated queens, you saved Joe. You didn't save America. You saved Joe Biden's you know what. And now you should demand that he saves our sister Marylin Mosby and anyone else in our community that needs to be saved. Thank you. God bless you. God keep you. Have a good evening. Until later on this week, you've been listening to Conversations with Conrad, not from the right, not from the left, but common sense from an African American perspective.